Welcome to the Fly Culture Podcast, bringing you interviews, reviews and fishing tips. Here's your host, Pete Tigers.
As long as being a lifelong fisherman, Chris Hague is an instructor and a guide. In this episode of the Fly Culture Podcast, I get a chance to pick his brains about trout fishing. We cover nymph fishing, we cover dry fly fishing, and some salmon tips as well. I hope you'll enjoy this podcast as much as I have done. The mayfly are hatching, the trout are rising. The countryside looks as though the saturation has turned up to at least 12 at the moment. Everything's looking beautiful. I hooked a salmon in the week as well, which came off sadly, which is a shame, but I'm okay with that at the moment. So everything's pretty good. But my guest today, Chris Hague, how are you? Is everything good with you?
Yeah, fine, Pete. Thanks very much, and thanks for having me.
Oh, you're more than welcome. Well, I've wanted to catch up with you for a long time because there's lots, and we'll go into it a little bit later, that I'm really keen to pick up with you with some fishing tips and how you approach your fishing, which I think listeners will really, really enjoy. But I'm also excited to learn about your fishing career and what's going on in your fishing life right now. So how is it? Are you busy? Are you fishing? What are you up to right now?
Yeah, so I am fishing. I've fished, but I had a knee operation back in February, so that set me back a little bit. So I've had a massive catch-up with lessons, guided days. I have managed to get out on the River Dure, went to Chatsworth a few times. But it's going to get busy. I fly to Italy on Thursday to assess for the FFI. I'm back one day, then we're going to Cape Verde, so I'm hoping to fish there. And then when I come back, I'll be dropping onto trout, and then quickly I go to Iceland. So it's going to get really busy.
Your life really sucks, doesn't it?
That's what my daughter says to me. It sucks to be Chris.
Yeah. Tell me something. As an instructor, and as somebody now who assesses potential instructors, how do you find that process? Is it nerve-wracking, but in a different way? Because I guess you really want these people to pass, and they've got to attain a certain standard. How do you find that, being the other side of the fence, as it were?
Yeah, it's. I think it makes you a more rounded teacher as well. You see a lot of different methods. You see people coming forward. The ones that are mentored tend to be the ones that get through. The ones that have had a good mentor. I think the ones that just go it alone is the ones that usually come up short. I think if anybody's looking at that path, my advice would be to get in touch with a good mentor. And you do want them to do well. You want them all to pass. But unfortunately, there's a standard to achieve, and if people don't achieve that standard on the day, then you've got to be strong enough to turn around and go, I'm sorry, but unfortunately today you've not been successful. Doesn't mean they'll not come back and be successful in the future. You know, it's just on the day. I mean, when I did my exams, I failed one exam. And I think that's what made me the instructor I am today. It made me come back stronger. I was never going to be in that position again. And I think it makes you a stronger person.
Nice. And do you mentor people yourself?
Yeah. I get quite a few coming to be mentored for exams, yeah. It's hard work. It's mentally, assessing and mentoring people is mentally taxing. You know, it's... you're buying into part of their project, so you want them to be successful. At the end of the day, if they're representing you when they go forward to take their exams.
Yeah, and is it sort of one of those proud father type moments when they pass as well, and you get that email or you're there?
Yeah, you're blown away. That's what you want. I mean, success for them, and also it reflects on what they've done with you as well. So, you know, it's a proud moment. It's like when you've taught somebody, you know, from the beginning. I've got a couple of clients going to Iceland, a man and wife, and I can remember Craig coming for lessons, and he started out, and I've seen him develop into a really good trout angler, really good salmon angler, and his wife as well. I've had Karen for lessons. And last year, when they were hooking, when they were coming in at lunchtime and saying, "Oh, I've had two, or I've had one this morning," and it's really nice to see your clients progress and catch fish and enjoy what they're doing.
Yeah, and it's a form of legacy, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I suppose it is, Pete. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me about Cape Verde. What goes on there? What are you catching? What are you chasing?
So it's a family holiday, but it's a battle between my wife whether she gets an extra handbag in or whether I get an extra rod in case. There's a lot of shark out there. There's a lot of big billfish, but bonito. There's lots of different species, but it's very windy, very windy. So it's difficult to fish from the shore. I might try and book a trip out on a boat, but I will fish from shore. But I mean, last time over there was a few years ago before COVID, and I can remember one day Benito was shoving bait fish up to the shore, and I was literally putting cast after cast after cast through these Benito, and I just could not get a take. And this persisted for about 2 hours, and I tried every fly at different depths, and it was just one of them days when you just could not crack the code, and I was thinking about it for days after. But that's fishing. That's fishing.
Absolutely. And then off to Iceland. And what does that mean? Does that mean salmon? Or because it's obviously becoming a very popular trout destination as well, and it's easier to get to than New Zealand as well, isn't it?
Yeah. There's some fantastic trout fishing out there, and I have caught trout out there. But my trip is a salmon trip. I'm fishing 2 rivers this year with clients. On the Erfos waterfalls, and then we're going to the West Ranger, which I have a regular week on. I have regular days on the West Ranger. So yeah, crystal clear water. It's like sight fishing for salmon. It's and stunning landscape. Stunning landscape.
Yeah.
And a lot of different methods. You can itch for them. You can swing flies. I've even single hand. I've even caught salmon in Iceland on a single-handed rod, eye sticking, pulling a heavy-weighted nymph across front of salmon because you can basically sight them in the water. So yeah, it's different, and they're absolutely just machines. I don't know if it's the quality of the water because it's crystal clear, well oxygenated, there's great flow on the river, or if it's because they haven't had to travel as far as our fish that come into UK. They're nearer to the feeding grounds, whether they're coming fresher. But honestly, you catch a £10 fish there and you think it's £15.
Wow. That does sound amazing. And hitching to me sounds fascinating. I've only really fished in the UK for salmon, and I'm either there for a short time or where I fish, there aren't many fish about. So I've never got to the stage where I've had the confidence to try it with any. Is it as cool as they say?
Well, it's like dry fly fishing for trout because it's very visual. You'll see each fly coming across, and then all of a sudden you'll see the full take. So it's the equivalent to dry fly fishing for trout for me. Yeah, but once you've one day last year, I'd had a few fish at the morning, and the guide said to me, "Let's try and itch through this pool." So because you've had fish, like you've said, you might be battling away in Scotland and not touch the fish, and you don't want to risk itching, so you stick with a method that you think you're going to catch on. It's because you've got limited time. There, you've got more time, and you're dialed into what's happening on water more, and you're prepared to try different methods.
Yeah. I think probably if I was lucky enough to get one under my belt or a few under my belt, and I have done it on the Devon years back actually, and I really, really enjoyed it. The river was low, and it just felt the right thing to try. And I've got bombers in the fly box and all sorts of stuff. But like I say, it's just those windows are so small that I should try it. Funnily enough, the salmon I hooked, and the other thing as well, and I don't know if anglers listening. Explaining that the riffle hitch is basically a skated fly that the salmon come up and eat. But the other day I hooked a fish, and I was fished a micro tube, like a really, really small one. And again, I've never had 100%. I have caught fish that way, and I hooked one I remember that just I lost control of. But it's having the confidence to try these things, isn't it? And it was funny that fish actually took the fly, and it was a lovely feeling, and it leapt around for a bit, so we saw it leapt clear of the water. But sometimes having the confidence is a major part of that, and that can come to trout flies as well, can't it?
Definitely. I think you fish what you've got confidence in, don't you? You've probably got half a dozen go-to dry flies that you've really got confidence in. You have probably, I've got a box full of Europe nymphs, but I probably have my 6 go-to ones before I'll try anything else. And it's having confidence in your fly, having a confidence in your setup, your equipment, to go and try and land fish.
Yeah, I'm like you, that I've cut everything back and I've got 2 small fly boxes again, with just some dries in. And I often talk on here that the pearl butt merger is probably my most prolific fly, although I'm fishing mayfly patterns at the moment. And you're on the previous podcast as well. My friend Warren ties up these Catskill old style flies, and we had great fun fishing those. They were fabulous fun. I don't know if you like messing around with patterns a little bit that way, or having nods to tradition and old style sort of flies. Do you like that sort of thing?
Yeah, I do like different flies. Obviously, I've got boxes upon boxes of mayflies that I've acquired, but I've really slimmed back this year. Well, over the last few years, I have. I'm sort of, if it'll not go in my waders or in a chest pack a small chest pack I have, it doesn't go. And when I salmon fish, I literally have my flies and my leaders in my wader pockets, and then I might have a bottle of water shoved down top, and that's it. I don't like carrying excessive equipment.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Yeah, no, I'm absolutely with you on that front. Tell me then, I'm already building a picture of you as an angler, but how would you describe yourself as an angler? Are you relaxed? Are you focused? Do you just go out and enjoy the day? Are you a bit of everything? How would you best describe yourself?
Yeah, I think because I'm teaching and guiding a lot, Pete, or on a destination trip or whatever, my fishing time is limited. So I would say when I'm on water, I'll go dawn until dusk. I'll go hard, fish hard, but I'm quite relaxed when I'm on water. I'm relaxed at what I'm doing. I'm comfortable, but I try to get the maximum out of it because opportunities are limited for me.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And so does that mean, being a guide, that you are used to having company on the river, or when you get those rare days off, does that mean that you prefer to fish hard on your own, or do you like a combination of both?
Combination, to be honest. I enjoy going on fishing trips when you've got camaraderie and there's good banter and things like that. You can have a laugh. But I like my own time on the water as well. I'll just jump in truck with the dog and we'll go down to the river, and sometimes we'll walk miles upon miles just waiting for a rising fish. Or I might jump in a pool and Euro nymph it or whatever. But yeah, that's sort of my own head space. That clears my head. And I enjoy being out in nature as well. Some days you can have a tough day on water when you can't crack code, but you'll see an otter or you'll see a kingfisher, and it's just great to be out in nature.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell me, I've been asking this question a little bit of late, and music. Do you have a soundtrack or anything? What gets you in the mood for a day's fishing? Do you listen to something in the car, or will it? I know your background's sport as well, so will it be a bit of Radio 5 Live and a bit of football, or will it be music?
I'm talk sport, so I listen in because I listen to a lot of football. I watched played football all through youth team and into professional. So yeah, I like my sport. I like football, so I listen to talk sport. But I like a lot of indie music, so Stereophonics, Kings of Leon, loads of groups like that. Really, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good choice. And I'm finding this a really good question because it tells me a little bit about you and a little bit about your taste and those sorts of things. Now I think, oh yeah, I like his music taste. I'd like to fish with him, but B, listen to some music on the car on the way to the river as well. So some excellent choices there as well. So very happy about that. You said about when you're fishing that you'll sometimes walk for miles looking for a rising fish, or you might Euro nymph with a pool as well if there's not much going on. Does that mean you're an angler who carries a couple of rods with them?
Yeah, always carry two. Yeah, usually salmon fishing as well. I'll have two set up. So yeah, my go-to methods is usually Euro nymphing rig and a dry fly rod on for trout, and then if I'm set up in Iceland, I'll have a couple of different sink rates on two different rods, and I tend to fish quite short rods in Iceland, so maybe a 12-9 and a switch rod. Yeah.
Nice. Nice. And in salmon angling, there's been so many changes, hasn't there? And you touched on density tips and density lines, I guess. We've seen that's been a real explosion for the sport, hasn't it? The ability to have a wide range of lines to throw your fly to the fish.
Definitely. I mean, I've been using 4D and 4D compact. I'm not mentioning guideline equipment because that's what I get a chance to use, being an ambassador for them, and I've been for the best part of 10 years. So I actually think them 4D lines have caught me fish that I probably wouldn't have gone in past because they allow me to go down a pool, chop and change depth, get to where the fish are. They're just so versatile. And because the short shooting heads, Pete, you're not putting your body through a lot of havoc on water. You know what I mean? You can keep going all day. It's a short rod, short shooting head. I mean, traditionally everybody wants to fish a 15-foot rod over here, but the Scandis have been doing it for years. And everybody fishes shorter rods, which is less fatigue on your body. And they're more versatile because you can get the shooting heads, like I said to you, they'll come with a 4 density line, will come with 4 density, so it'll sink like that. Yeah, does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Where the old traditional lines, the wet cells, would all go down together in one because they're all sinking at the same rate. So you'll get knocks on the bottom where the 4 and 3D lines tend to fish above obstructions but still into the teeth of the fish coming across the river. Yeah, I think it's been fantastic for sport shooting as it makes it a lot easier for people to be able to cover water.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think one of the best descriptions I heard for multi-density lines as well is that they cut in or dig into the flow a little bit better as well. Do you subscribe to that?
Definitely. I mean, I'll carry different tips. I'll carry different bodies as well. So I'll carry a floating body, but if I'm in fast water and I want to slow the drift down, I'll maybe go to a float sink 2 or an intermediate sink 3 body. So it's going under the current and it's digging in more, and then it's slowing the fly down coming across the water. It's giving the fly more time in front of the fish. I think depth and pace is paramount when you're salmon fishing. Absolute paramount.
Yeah.
So it's cracking that code. Right depth, right pace.
And do you move your flies? Do you manipulate them much when you're salmon fishing?
I've had more success swinging, than I am stripping. Obviously, if I've got a sunray on or an itch, I'm stripping. But I would honestly say throughout my life, I've had more success swinging flies. But what I don't like to do is I will strip, but very slowly all the time, maybe pulling an inch in at a time. And the reason I do that, I was fishing in Iceland a couple of years ago, and I had a guide who said, "Chris, there's fresh fish in this pool." And he went to crawl down the bank, and he laid with his head over the top of the bank, and he could see the fish. And he shouted to me, "Make a cast." And then I made a cast, and it swung across, and he went a little bit more, like 5 centimetres more. And I kept adding, and it swung into the bank, and he put his hand up, and he went as if it had taken, and I couldn't feel it. I could not feel the fish take. So he went, that had it. He walked back round. He went, that had it in its mouth. He went, make the same cast again, and walked back down the bank. Made the same cast again, but I just kept more in touch, and I felt it straight away. I lifted into it, and it was a lesson learned. And so now I constantly move the line, but very, very like small pulls on it.
Yeah, nice. Because it fascinates me that if we're swinging flies and if we're salmon fishing, how much we don't see or we don't know. And when you were saying about Iceland there and being able to see the fish, you learn a lot there. I was thinking about the book Topher Brown's Salmon Magic, where they talk about guiding in Canada, where somebody similarly is up high. And not quite the same, but even on the river I used to guide on the tour, and I still fish, that there was a bank that was really high, and we could throw off the bank and then move the fly because it was very slow water. And I was just astounded how far a fish would come out for a fly as well. And of course, we're not seeing those things, and very often we're not feeling them as well. And just getting that chance to have a look, you learn a lot from that, don't you?
Oh, definitely. I mean, obviously, like you just mentioned there, if you're on some water and it's nearly like a canal, then you've got no option. You're going to have to put some movement into it. Do you know what I mean? You're going to have to make it look lifelike. But I've actually seen guides in Iceland stood on step ladders, stood on step ladders looking into water. Yeah,
Nice.
you see how they react, don't you? You can see the fish, you can see the fins twitch, or when they're getting a little bit agitated, and you learn when they're going to make a strike, and just like you said, just how far they will come for the fly. But in our country, we don't have that, do we? We can't sight fish in the UK. You know what I mean? So you're just waiting for that tug.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the chance to see one would be really, really cool. But also, I guess I can argue against that not knowing as well. But in my mind's eye, all the time when the fly's swinging across the pool, in my mind, there's a fish behind it that's going to bite, and it didn't that time, but it might do the next time, and that's what keeps me going the whole time. But thank you for some great info there, some great tips as well. And I recently saw the guideline video that you did with some fishing tips, and I wanted, if that's okay with you, to try and talk about some of those methods, because we talked about salmon a little bit as well. And you talked about, from a trout and I guess grayling perspective, some of the setups that you actually have. So I wanted to start subsurface at the moment. And you talked about Euro nymphing. And I wondered how you set up, and I guess the critical part of that is the leader setup that you use and how you set that up. And I wonder if you could give us a little bit of a flavour of how you actually go about doing that and how you rig up for that.
Yeah, so I've got various length rods, but my go-to rod is a 10'2" LPX nymph, and I pair it up with a lightweight 2-3 click reel, and then on that, I do have a Euro nymph line on, but what I do on the end of that is I connect some ASO yellow. It's a yellow 14-pound line, which is quite high vis, and it's just level line. And I'll probably I'll maybe have 15 meters of that on. Not because I want to cast 15 meters, Pete, but if I have a tangle on water, I've always got some more on reel where I can re-rig. So it's just a safety factor that. So I go from ASO, and then I have a 2-part strike indicator. And I'm constantly chopping and changing with my strike indicator. It's developed over time. And my setups, I'm always looking to try and gain that extra margin, to do better. So the first part of my setup is a core out of a shooting head. And a friend of mine, Alan Rees, gave me this tip about 5 years ago. And if you skewer it, it'll curl up. So when it's hung on the water, it's curled. So the slightest movement, it's either bottom or it's a take. So I like that, but you can't always see that colour on the water. So underneath that, I tie some tri or a bicolour in. And I find pink shows up really well for me. Everybody's eyesight's different. We all do pick different colours up, but pink works really well for me. So I tend to have pink in my tri or bicolour. And what I do, I tie them together and I leave tabs. So maybe half an inch long. So I don't cut them off tight. When we did the video, Jim Curry said to me, have you forgot your glasses, Chris? Have you forgot to chop them? I went, no, they're there for a purpose, Jim. Because when the line moves in the vertical like that, if you leave the tags on, the tags are more visual than the line. So the little tags that are on are very easy to spot. So I'll have probably 12-inch shooting head core, 12-inch bicolour, and then straight into level line through to my point fly. So if I'm fishing somewhere like Chatsworth, it's single fly, so I can only fish one nymph. So I'll either fish a point fly, or I will cheat it a little bit, and I'll put some lead shot on point, and then I'll tie a dropper in, maybe 18-inch, 24-inch back. Yeah, and that allows me to fish a smaller fly. Then it might be on a day where they're not looking at a big lump. They're getting a little bit, they're a little bit touchy, and then so I'd go smaller at that point. But I would say my first change, Pete, is usually bead colour. If I'm changing, if they're not taking, I will change bead colour before I change flies. If I'm fishing somewhere like on the Don, I might have 2 or 3 flies on. So I'll have probably heaviest on point and then a couple of droppers back. I have fished heaviest further back, on first point. But for me, I've had more success with it on point. And I like the fact that heavies fly on point, as it's coming down river and it's bouncing on bottom, it's putting brakes on it a little bit. So again, it's giving the fish more time to have a look.
Nice, great tips there. And tell me you said about bead colour will be one of the things you'll change. So let's say you've got a 2-nymph setup. What would your go-to be? Would that be black-coloured beads? Would it be just neutral-coloured? What would you tend to do, and what patterns would you tend to start off with if you're searching the water?
Yeah, so I would tend to I'd go with something probably either might be like a pheasant tail with a red neck, or that works really well for me, a red neck pheasant tail nymph. And further back, I might try a more mundane pattern, something a little bit darker, but I do like hotspot flies. They seem to work really well for me. So first of all, I'd probably go red neck on point, and I'd go something with a flash of colour. Only tied like a pheasant tail or an hare's ear, but something with some like an attractor pattern. And if they're not working, then I'll go back and I'll step back to the more traditional patterns, like just a standard hare's ear or a standard pheasant tail nymph with a dual bead. And there's days when they work, but I must admit, if you look in my nymph box, it is quite bright in colour. It looks like a rainbow. And I find that these attract. They're only pheasant tail nymphs or perdigons. I use a lot of perdies because they'll cut through water faster and get down. So yeah, I like bright colours on my nymphs, but I will change back to more mundane if that's not working.
And the bead colours. Sorry, mate.
Yeah, bead colours my first change. So I might go on a brass bead, then I might change to a black, a white, a pink, a purple, a rainbow bead. So I'll have a wide range of different coloured beads, reds.
Nice,
I like to
nice.
time up on different colours.
Yeah. And it's funny, isn't it, how reliable, even after all this time, the pheasant tail and all those many variants of pheasant tail are. It still works well, doesn't it? Because you can make many changes, can't you? You can have different coloured wire, different colour bead, different colour thorax. You could do something with the tail as well. There's so many things you can do just with one pattern, isn't there?
Oh, so much. But at the end of the day, I think presentation is paramount. You can have best fly box in the world. If you can't put fly in zone or fish it through the zone correctly, you're unlikely to catch fish.
Yeah.
Presentation's paramount.
Yeah. And tell me, if you're nymph fishing, do you vary how those nymphs are moving in the water? So would you, for example, because I know myself, sometimes what I'll do is dead drift the flies, then the next drift down, if I feel there's something or there should be something there, then I might manipulate them a little bit with a tiny little movement of the rod tip to try and manipulate those. Is that what you do?
Definitely. So like you, I'll put them through and I'll try to fish it like a grid. Sometimes I'm just, because like you fish that much, you've got a rough idea where the fish are going to be. But on a tough day, if I'm thinking there's got to be fishing here, I'll fish it like a grid, and I'll always say to clients, think about it like M1. Let's fish hard shoulder, then we'll fish first lane, we'll fish second lane, then we'll fish third lane. So we've covered absolutely everything. And I'll bring it through dead drift, and then I'll bounce it through. Just lift and drop, lift and drop, lift and drop. And sometimes it's like an induced take when you lift them. Sometimes they'll come for it. Yeah, very, nice. Very what you're doing.
Yeah. And do you strike at the end of the drift?
Yeah, always. And the amount of fish I've caught doing that is unbelievable. I strike at everything, slightest knock strike. But when I come to the end of the drift, I always strike out. And it's uncanny, the amount of fish that I've caught like that I didn't even know, looking at the fly.
Yeah, nice. I've sort of changed that a little bit in that I don't strike. I just sort of slowly induce them at the end. In my silly little mind, that it works for me to just slowly lift it to give them a better chance to eat it. And like you say, that set probably works better, I would think, because sometimes you sort of bump the fish. It doesn't always work, but in my mind, I'm thinking, right, that's coming through nice and slowly. The fish gets a chance to hit that. But I would think the set probably does work a greater success rate. But I think the slower lift might bring more into play. I don't know that. It's not so with any knowledge, but
it might just induce the fish to come, because you're
Yeah.
lifting it on a. I was fishing on the Eden the other week, and I was bumping quite a lot of fish using a Euro nymphing setup. But they all seem to be taking me behind, where usually, I'm getting more fish in front. And they seem to be taking me when the line were rising up like an induced take. So I quickly swapped method. I went on a floating line, and I long leader, and I fished a pheasant tail nymph on point, and I put a couple of spiders on, and I had a couple of fish straight away through a pool just by changing setup.
Yeah, nice. And that's the real skill of an angler, isn't it? To realise they've got to make change, not, well, that pool's a bit dead. If you're feeling something, then it's good to change things up a little bit, isn't it? And so, right, I think this is, and you learned something from those bumps, and it worked. And that's something I think, if I can echo across to anglers, don't be afraid to change. Don't be afraid to stop for a moment and re-rig and think about things, particularly if nothing's happening. And being flexible is really important, isn't it?
Definitely. Being able to fish different methods. What tends to happen is an angler will go to water and have success with one method, but they think that method's going to work every day, and it's not. I always say, when I go to water, you're trying to crack the code, and every day it's a different code. Some days you will, and some days you won't. But I think it's the tough days when you won't, when you're having to think more and try different methods, is what keeps us coming back, Pete. Do you know what I mean? It keeps us hungry for fishing. But yeah, definitely the ability to fish different methods is beneficial. And fishing different species, I think, makes you a more rounded angler. Trout, grayling, saltwater, salmon. You see something in the trout world what you might take into your salmon fishing. And vice versa, You're always learning. You're always learning. Every day is a school day.
I think you're right about that, and I think that's why I love it so much, is that I just want to continue to understand what has happened, why it's happened, and if nothing has happened, why has nothing happened? And that's what I kind of enjoy about that aspect of it, plus all the other stuff, and we'll come on to casting after we've talked about dry flies as well. But I think for me, definitely, and it sounds like yourself and many of the people listening as well, that that's what keeps me driving back to say, yeah, this is what I want to try and understand. Why did that happen? Why didn't that happen? And yeah, for me, that's a fun aspect of it. But let's move on to the dry fly then. So how do you set up for that? What sort of length rod are you using? We can also extol the virtues of choosing the right fly line, which we have done with salmon, and on previous podcasts I have the importance of that as well. And how do you find that as an importance for your setup, and how do you set up?
So dry fly, I love a 9-foot rod. So my go-to rod at the moment is a 9-foot NT8 guideline, and I'll use a Fario reel on that. My line that I'm either using the Fario Elite or the Fario or the CDC, the new CDC line. So the Fario Elite is a fantastic line. It's a spearcaster's dream, but it also holds a beautiful loop together. CDC is a great overhead line, but I think the Fario is a better spearcasting line, if I'm honest. So that's my go-to line, my go-to rod, reel and line. I use a leader called a Power Strike leader. It's a guideline leader, Power Strike. But these leaders, Pete, they come in various lengths, but they're designed to turn tippet over. So I might have a 12-foot leader on, but then I might be fishing, adding tippet at 20 foot, and they'll turn over relatively easy. They are designed to turn extra tippet over. Really cool, leaders. So I'll be fishing anywhere between 15-foot and 20-foot leader, maybe slightly more at times if we're super spooky. Again, it's all about presentation. If it's really windy day, you might not get away with fishing your leader as long, but Yeah, I'll fish as long as possible, as long as leader as possible, and as fine a tip as I dare go. So, yeah, I'm looking for presentation. I want the fly to move natural on the water.
Yeah, that's a good shout. I'm gonna search out those leaders as well when we finished. So they sound.
I know John Norris's have got them in because James sent me some other day. So anybody who's looking for them, they've got them in stock. Right?
Nice. I'll have a look for those. And tell me, are you... So let's talk the scenario through. You're on the river. You might be at Chatsworth, but you might be on the Eden. Let's say you've seen a fish rise. What's the next stages that you actually go through?
So I try and... It might be a short window of opportunity. You know what I mean? That fish might only be rising for 10, 20 minutes. So I don't want to waste time, but I want to be stealthy. So my approach would be stealthily. I would try and manipulate myself into a position where I weren't going to line the fish. I don't like lining fish. I don't like putting my line over the fish. So I'd make a cast where I could get as long a dead drift as possible, but I weren't lining the fish.
Nice. I think that makes perfect sense. And then I guess what you're doing is adding slack, because again, it's something else we try and talk to people. Are you somebody who likes to add slack by, let's say, a reach cast and reaching the rod upstream? Obviously, there might be situations where we do it downstream. And then, so we call that an in the air mend. But also, will you add slack as well when the line is on the water too?
I'll do absolutely anything to keep that dead drift going as long as possible. If my first movement would always be an aerial mend because it's causing less disturbance on water. If I'm mending on water, I will if I can keep the drift going. But it's a trade-off. I don't want to disturb the water too much. I'd sooner let the fly run through, make another cast and put an aerial mend in. But if I think I can get away with it without disturbing the fish, I'll try and keep that dead drift going as long as possible.
Nice.
Sorry, go on.
No, I was only going to say, actually, so if you'd seen that fish rise, you've covered it, and you've put all the slack, because we're always, as dry fly anglers, we're nervous about micro drag, but of course micro drag as well. So say that fish hasn't taken, what is the next route? Will you wait a little bit? Or will you change fly? Or what is the process that you actually go through?
So for me, I'd probably try and show it something different, and maybe from a different angle if I could, just chop things up a little bit. I'd probably go back and have a go at it, and then if it refused that time, I'd probably walk away from it, walk the bank, do some more fishing, and maybe come back when it's rested and try again.
Gotcha. Yeah, but it is, I think, listeners getting out of this, as we've talked many times, it's all about the drift, isn't it? And presentation and drift.
Yeah, definitely. Even with, your own nymphing, dry fly, whatever, it's all about presentation. So, and I always said to people when they come to me for lessons, you come along with this toolbox and you've got limited casts in it. And the more casts we can put into that toolbox, the more fish you'll cover. The more fish you'll cover, potentially you'll catch more fish. So nice. Presentation is absolutely paramount.
Yeah. And you said something interesting when we were talking about fly lines, that from a trout and grayling perspective, you said one of the lines was really good for spey casting. Does that mean that you predominantly spey cast, I'm guessing, an upstream dry fly for trout? And if you do, can you tell me why and the advantages that you see for that method of fishing?
So I think spey casting in general opens an all new world of fishing up to people. I think the amount of anglers I see that walk past fish that are rising because there's high vegetation at the back and they can't make the cast. So I think it opens an all new world up. And it's not just about spey casting, Pete. I might use a spey cast, a snap cast, change angle fastly, but then come back and I might take it into an aerial cast. So it then becomes a combination cast. But the spey cast has allowed me to change direction quickly and cover fish faster. So you will cover a lot more fish if you can spey cast. So, and then turning them into a combination cast. For me, there's only really 2 or 3 times you'll ever use an overhead cast. Distance accuracy. So a lot of time, if I'm dry fly fishing, I'll use a spey cast, come back, send it into a combination cast, into an overhead cast, might dry fly a little bit, and then I'll present.
Nice.
But the ability to change from one side of the river to other using the spey cast, it's not always changing by swinging flies at 90 degrees or at 45 degrees. I might be fishing upstream, and the line might come down left side of the river. I might snap cast, go into an overhead cast, present to a fish that's rising up right hand side of the river, and you change your direction is like that. So you are covering more fish, and it's less fatigue on your body as well.
Yeah, nice tip. And that may be worth listeners looking up at some stage as well. And some of the casts that Chris has mentioned there may be of use to you as well, particularly if you're fishing, like say, slightly bigger rivers or want that quick change in direction. And you mentioned the word combination cast there as well. And I thought that was kind of interesting because I would think many anglers, and even when I've taught beginners, because we used to teach beginners on the river, they're putting combinations of casts together without thinking about it. And I think one of the best river casts to get you going is the roll pickup, isn't it? And that's a roll cast, but before line touches the water, go into the back cast, loads the rod deeply and beautifully, and you're able to fire it out without minimum force cast. It's a great cast, isn't it?
Superb cast. It's a cast that I use all the time on the river, especially if I'm fishing up. Even if there's high vegetation on both sides of the river, you can still use that cast because you're wading down the middle of the river, and as you're just letting the water roll, it forms your roll cast for you. So you're basically letting the water wash your line underneath you, going into a roll cast and then going into an overhead cast for better presentation. Superb cast.
Yeah, we found that really useful. And it was fascinating that you said about using the spey cast, but using them to go into the overhead, because one of the things I've used them in the past, but not to any great degree. But my concern would be fishing CDC flies that if I was just spey casting them, how damp they'd get very, very quickly. But using that combination gives you the best of both worlds, doesn't it?
Yeah, you've got to be careful. Obviously, CDC, they drown quite easy, don't they? So you've got to be careful, but one snap onto the water. And like I said, just dry your fly out over an overhead and then present. It's definitely, spey casting is definitely the way forward if you want to up your fish numbers. Definitely.
Nice. And that brings us, segued beautifully along onto Speyworks. Can you tell me a little bit about Speyworks and what that is?
I think I was bored in lockdown. And I decided to create a page called Speyworks. And it's one of my demonstrations is called The Only Way is Spey, and it's basically driving the message home that spey casting, it will enhance your fishing. But I wanted to create like an hub, like a learning centre where we've all started out fishing and gone and bought a setup that's wrong, it's not matched, it's not well balanced, and I wanted to create like an hub where people can come, whether it's trout or salmon, anything related to fishing, setups, where they can come in there and post a question, and then more experienced anglers can come in there and with the replies. And I don't want it to be a Chris Hague show. I don't want it to be a guideline show. I want other manufacturers to be in there. If they want to put adverts in there, fine. If they're offering rod, reel and line setups, if shops want to go in there and post, that's fine. But I want it to be a place where people can go for help and be like a learning centre, like an hub. So we've had some great debates. We had a debate on should you use a treble hook or should you use a double hook when salmon fishing. Now, I actually know a guide in Iceland, if you've got a treble hook on, first thing he does is pulls a pair of pliers out and chops one of the legs off. He's convinced that using a double is the way forward. And we've had other things about, do you fight a salmon on an eye rod or do you bend it more into side? Really interesting stuff. So there's not just stuff in there for beginners, but even intermediate and advanced. And that's what I'm trying to do, is create a learning hub, a centre where people can go and gain information from experienced anglers.
Nice. And does that mean it's more salmon-centric, or does it cover some of the stuff that we've just talked about from a trout point of view?
No, I mean, you can spey cast using a trout rod. It's exactly the same mechanics. It's just we use two-handed on a two-handed rod, we use one hand on a single-handed rod. So yeah, it's just. I set that name up, Speyworks, because for me, spey works. So it's open to trout, grayling, it's open to even saltwater. If somebody wants to post a question in there, I must admit, it seems to have got a big salmon following, but it's definitely not just for salmon anglers.
Nice. Well, that's really good.
Yeah, what I'm going to say, what I might do is I might put a couple more staff, some experienced guys. I might set them up so that if I'm not available to answer questions, or that they can answer questions, so people get a quick turnaround on answers.
Nice. That's really cool. And you talked about lines there, and we've talked about them previously. And one of the tips, we've always tried to say is if you're buying a new rod, obviously try it beforehand. But I always think one of the first places, or one of the best places to look, is if that rod you have bought, the manufacturer builds fly lines or produces fly lines as well. That's a really, really good place to start, isn't it? And I'm suspecting Guideline's exactly the same on that front.
Yeah, obviously Guideline make numerous rods and numerous lines, and obviously when Life, who's head of product development, is testing the equipment, is using these lines on Guideline rods, so they are matched to go well hand in hand. But I've seen Fario Elite, for example, used on various trout rods, Sage, all different manufacturers' trout rods, and they still work well, but they are designed and matched to go together. So, yeah I would think, if I were going out and buying a rod and reel setup, if I could buy one from a manufacturer that did both, I would be quite confident that it was going to work on it.
Excellent. And I was just thinking about the debate you said about playing a fish with a rod high and from the side. And the side thing's kind of interesting because I've been fortunate enough to do a little bit of steelhead fishing, and that's how the guys like a steelhead to be played.
Right.
And I've done it over here, and it has worked as well. I'm not always as confident because I've so few to go at that I want to, but it works. Where do you stand on that, just as an aside while we're talking about it?
So, funny story, we have had numerous conversations with guys at Guideline, Jim and other guys in Guideline team, and we tend to try and like low rod or bent at side. But I was in Iceland a couple of years ago, and I was going down on pool on the Ranga, and it was absolutely stuffed with fish. And I hooked 6 fish, and I played them on the side, and I lost every fish beat. And my head was wrecked, and I'm thinking, you're trying to crack that code again. I'm thinking, what can I do? What am I doing wrong? What am I doing different? I thought, next time I hook a fish, I'm going to eye rod it. I'm just going to try something different. I'm going to eye rod it. Next 3 fish I ate, I put everyone on bank. It's just, you couldn't write it, do you know what I mean? But I must admit, I try to play low or to the side if I can. I have this thing in my head, if I've got the rod high, that I'm maybe pulling the hook upwards and potentially making it come out.
Nice. That's good and fair arguments for both sides of it as well. Yeah. And it is one, because that's, again, in my mind's thinking, was it the way the fish were taking when they didn't stick? Was it there? And that's the wonderful thing about this, isn't it?
We'll never know.
Yeah.
We'll never know. You've got to be confident in what works for you. It might not work for the next guy, but when you hook a fish, you've got to play in. I think you revert back to what you've had success with. And if I'm honest, I've had more success holding the rod low and playing them into side. But just on that day that I tried something different in Iceland, the eye method worked for me.
Yeah, nice. And folks, this page, Speyworks, is a Facebook page, and it's SPEYWORX, in case you want to search that out and join up. That's correct. Is that Chris?
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct, Pete. Speyworks with an X. Yeah.
Excellent. Fantastic. Now, we've touched on Cape Verde. Salt water, I get the sense that's something close to your heart as well.
Love saltwater fishing. I mean, what would you rather be doing? Stood freezing your butt off for grayling, or stuck in front of a skiff in a pair of shorts in sunshine? Yeah, I love saltwater fishing, and I've fished all around the world. Love Dubai. There's a great company out there called Ocean Active that I've fished with quite a few times. Funny story, I was in Dubai and I was due to fish with Nick, and I was laid on the beach with my wife, and we stayed on the palm, and I could see a ball of bait fish getting pushed at surface. There were birds coming in, feeding from top, and I looked at my wife and I went, I'm going to get my rod. And she went, Chris, you're fishing tomorrow, can't you just have a day off? I went, Bev, that's about bait, the baiting, the pushing fish up to surface. There's a lot of activity. I'm going to get my rod. So I went and got my rod, strung it up, and I'm watching these fish move around. You could see them jumping through the surface. So I said, I'm going to walk up the beach and have a cast from top. She went, wait a minute, I'll come up with you. So we walked up to the top of the beach, and as this ball of fish came hurling towards us, I made a couple of casts. First cast, I felt hook up, but then it just went, boom, it had gone. So when I pulled it in, it just snapped the line off. So I made a short trace and put a fly on. Couple more casts, needlefish, couple more casts again, another needlefish. And they have got to be the smelliest fish ever, Pete. I don't know if you've ever caught them. They're absolutely Anyway, I persevered, and then I ate something big. And I said to my wife, this is a big fish. And as I managed to get it in with a barracuda, so what I think were happening were needlefish were getting pushed up by barracuda, and birds were feeding off top. So I'm unhooking this barracuda, and I'm being gentle with it. And as I'm unhooking it and putting it back, and I'm watching my fingers, a big boat pulls from around the corner, a big red and white boat, and they're all dressed in white Arabs with headdress on. My wife says to me, Chris, they're watching you. And it said security outside, and I went, maybe because everybody's seen anybody fly fish before, but I don't know why they're watching us. We're not really doing anything wrong. So she went, I wouldn't fish again if I were you. So I broke the rod down, and as we set off walking down the beach, and as we're walking down the beach, this boat's tracking us. So we were walking back towards the hotel, and this boat's tracking us. And she went, they're following us. I went to her, Bev, they can't really miss us, can they? She said, why? I said, well, you might as well have a flare, because she'd got an hat on, a sun hat on, what size of a sombrero. So I said, take that hat off. So look at that. We walked down the beach, and when we got back into where the hotel and there were bodies, they sort of lost us. So we laid back on some bed, and boat pulled away. So I never thought any more about it. And then that night, we were going into the city to do some shopping. And as we're pulling off Palm, you know the big motorway signs that light up on motorway? There was a sign and it said, strictly no fishing on the Palm. So I weren't nearly on your podcast, I was nearly on that popular TV programme, Banged Up Abroad.
I thought if someone was watching, you might think, oh, they're enjoying the loops I'm popping out, so I'll throw it a little bit further. And that's an interesting point, isn't it? You said you were with your wife fishing. It's a interesting one to do, isn't it? It's combining fishing and family holidays, isn't it? And it can work really well. But sometimes you're feeling, like you say, you're seeing the bait balls going. It's kind of an interesting balance to be able to play if you're holidaying with a wife or partner or whoever it may be. It's a interesting one to try and manage, isn't it?
Yeah, it's difficult, but I mean, she's absolutely brilliant, my wife. If I came in and said to her, I've got Chancery Rod in Scotland next week, what do you think? She'd say, well, I don't think what I say matters, Chris. She knows you. She's sort of, you're going to go anyway, do you know what I mean? And she calls me Funtime Frankie. She always says, what's Funtime Frankie got on this week? Because she knows I'm here, there and everywhere fishing and whatever you're there. Yeah, love her to pieces. So.
Oh, fantastic. And the fish I've always, and I've not caught one for a long, long time, I say a while anyway, tarpon, any thoughts on those? And we had in the magazine about almost how you could in some way compare it with salmon in the way that they're hard to hook. We count jumps, we count takes, we count those sort of things. Do you have any thought on tarpon, and have you been lucky enough to lock into one?
No, I've fished out in Florida. The camp out, I've got Leslie Holmes who mentored me for my master's, has got his own business out in Florida. And when you're in Florida, you'll see boat after boat after boat. They're just camped, waiting for tarpon coming up that coast. It's unbelievable. But again, it's something I'd like to do. But when I go, I don't want to sit in a boat waiting for that opportunity for a day, because I don't get that much chance to fish, so I want to fish for other species that we might catch. It's like I enjoy saltwater fishing I love flats fishing, so sight fishing or sight fishing from a skiff or whatever. But I've actually done big billfish, tuna, and billfish in Kenya. And there's a lot of time, although I enjoy it, there's a lot of time wasted, just trolling for hours on end with teasers out, just waiting for one sailfish to show its face. So I like to be more active than playing the waiting game, if I'm honest. So I think with tarpon, you've got to sit there, you've got to be super patient. Same with things like billfish, you've got to be prepared to sit on a boat with teasers out, dragging it back in a boat for hours upon end, just for maybe one or two shots, if you're lucky.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's fair enough. And that comes around, I guess, to what we were saying about the salmon and limited times we have on trips and things. I'm a real champion of the underdogs, though, and snook is a favourite of mine. Do they come onto your radar?
Love snook. They're absolutely hook into a snook and hold on because it's going to Cuba. Do you know what I mean? They're real strong fish, super fish. I was fishing in Florida off a skiff. Probably 4 a.m. in the morning. It was absolutely pitch black. And Leslie had fixed me up with a guy who'd got a skiff, and he took me out. And pulled up to these jetties feet, and there were lights on the jetties, and you could see activity, fish slapping surface. So again, it was fish pushing a bait ball up to shore under these jetties. And he said to me, just throw your fly onto the beach. And I said, what we're going to catch on there? A crab, like, joking, you know what I mean? And he went, no, leave it there. Literally, within 5 minutes, bait ball got shoved into that area. It went strip. So I'm stripping, pitch black, all of a sudden, bang, and snook. They're just superb fighting fish. Really, really strong. Yeah, really like them. Probably pound for pound as good a fighting fish as you'll look, Although I would say yellowfin tuna is probably the hardest fighting fish I've hooked.
And that's not one that's really on the radar, is it? As well, in the sense of traditional saltwater fishing, of saltwater fly fishing. Sorry.
No, I stumbled into them. We were in Kenya, and all of a sudden, again, birds hitting surface and fish. You could see them pushing bait ball to the surface, and it was tuna. So the captain, managed to get the boat into a position, and he cut the engines because tuna just will not come near a boat when engines is on, in my experience. And I've had that on a couple of occasions. As soon as the engines were cut and we drifted over at bait ball, I hooked a few. But what amazes me is how they fight. You hook a queenfish in Dubai and it wants to fight you on surface. It's throwing itself about on surface. Same with the sailfish. But a tuna, when you've hooked one because the only way it's going is down, and it'll just empty your reel. It's just straight down to the bottom, and there's just no stopping them.
Wow.
So strong.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. Yeah, like the sound of that. So tell me something. I've got a few quick fire questions for you. Double-handed or single-handed rod, which is your favourite?
To be honest, Pete, I'm really, really comfortable around both, and I love both trout fish, trout, salt, and I love my salmon as well. If I had to make a push over the last couple of years, I've been heavily into salmon, so I would have to probably slightly lean towards double-handed at the moment, but that can change.
Nice. And it goes with conditions, doesn't it? I'm similar to you, that if it's good for salmon, salmon's what I'm interested in. And if it's no good for salmon, then it's trout. And that's where we're lucky, where we fish for all these species, aren't we?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, through winter, I will pike grayling. Then through season, I'll be sort of trout and then saltwater, salmon. So, yeah, I'm lucky that I fish for a lot of different species, and I'm lucky that I get to travel to some fantastic places.
Nice. So we're going to drill down some more then. Trout or salmon? Which one?
Well, at this moment in time, because if I picked a double-handed rod, I've got to go salmon, king salmon at this moment in time.
Nice. Perfect. Dream destination?
I've been to the Maldives on holiday. and I went to an island where you couldn't fish. But I think I would love to go to islands further north, I believe, are even better. I mean, it's such a stunning place, but to be able to go there and fish, yeah, I think that'd be definitely on my list.
Nice. No, very, very good choice. I've been lucky enough to fish where you can fish there, and I can recommend it. And was even lucky enough to catch a small permit there as well, an Indo permit, which was really, really cool. So fishing's always been a part of your life. You know, you've grown up living near to water, and it shaped you as an angler from a very early age. Are you loving it as much as you've always done it?
Probably more now. I fell in love with fly fishing on a holiday to Wales, and when I came back, the only thing I want to do is fly fish. And every fish that I catch now is caught on a fly. That's all. I don't touch any other method whatsoever. Yeah, I've always loved it. Yeah.
I'm similar to you that I only really use a fly rod. And in the olden days when you had to take the exam and had to do some spinning, I was absolutely terrible because I just didn't. And I nearly, for the AAP guy exam, you had to do it. And that was the only part of the exam that I was frightened about at that time because I'd so deeply prepared for it. And I can't explain the relief when they said, we're not going to have this in the exam anymore. Yeah. And I was just walking on air from that moment onwards that I didn't do it. So, but like you say, there's so many species and you've touched on them. We're so lucky to be able to go after so many species, aren't we, with the fly rod?
Yeah, definitely. And it's just, for me, it's a bit purist. So I suppose I'm a purist in a way. I want to catch it on a fly. Yeah, I think that's what drives me.
Nice. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. Chris, we've spoken for over an hour now, and you've just given us so much information across a wide variety of formats of our fishing, which has been great. I've got a sense of you as a person as well. How can people, if they want to get in touch with you, we talked about Spayworks, how can people find you? What are your social media handles and website if they want to book you up for a lesson?
Yeah, so my website is www.flyfishingwithchrishague.co.uk. You'll find me Chris Hague Fly Fishing or Chris Hague on Facebook. And now I'm Spayworks Chris Hague because I recently had my Instagram account hacked, so I've had to switch it across to Spayworks Chris Hague on Instagram. I do a little bit on Twitter, and I've also got a YouTube channel as well.
Nice. And for everyone, that is Chris Hague. That's Hague is spelled Hague. So you'll be able to find him there for guiding, for some lessons and everything else. Chris, it's been absolutely fantastic talking with you and getting so much great information. I know listeners are going to get their teeth into this one. So thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today.
Yeah, no problem, Pete. And thanks very much for having me. It's been nice to speak with you.
Well, I'm pleased I could fit in with your international jet lifestyle. So I've been fortunate to do that. Chris, thank you so much. It's been brilliant talking with you today.
Thank you, Pete. Speak soon.
Everyone, this has been the Fly Culture Podcast. I hope you've enjoyed this one as much as me. I think there's loads that we can pick through there. I'm going to go and find some new leaders to try out as well. So thank you so much for listening, and there'll be plenty more episodes of the Fly Culture Podcast very, very soon. Thanks for listening.
The Fly Culture Podcast is brought to you in association with Fly Culture, a quarterly print magazine. For more information, please visit flyculturemag.com. You can also find Fly Culture on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter.